Okay, I'd like to call tonight's budget meeting budget workshop number 2 to order. If you'd all please stand for a pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Beidel, please start where you would like to.
Thank you. We appreciate everybody's time this evening. As we reviewed in our first meeting, we did talk about numerous portions of the budget to include the debt service fund, the open space fund, the liquid fuels fund, and portions of the general fund budget. Tonight, we want to finish up the last department in the general fund, the community and economic development. Then we'll look at sewers. Then we'll go to solid waste, finally capital. I'm hopeful with this discussion, that the board can take some thoughts on the capital budget. We can review those items and then discuss them further Monday so that we can get appropriate feedback for any changes to the budget as proposed tonight. So
yeah, let me just chime in on that real quick. So the board will remember our last workshop, we talked about giving us everything in this budget packet that should be done, could be done, needs to be done, and for us to make a decision on what can be done, what should be done this year. What I've asked Bruce to do is to go through that list tonight with all of us so that we understand where staff is coming from, what staff recommendations are, what is most urgent, and then for us to take it back with us for the rest of the week until next Monday, where we then can sit and actually decide what we want to do, what we should do, how we pay for what we want to do, so that we put some thought behind it as opposed to just sitting and trying to haggle it out from a list on, after listening to it for a half hour. So this way we're as well informed as possible when we make that decision on Monday. So thank you, Bruce, for reminding me of it.
excellent. As we said Thursday night, if there's any questions from the board, please just stop me. We can have a further discussion. If I hit something fairly quickly, we can have a more detailed situation. And if you have questions or things we need to get some additional information or follow up, we'll note that and then have that for Monday as well, so that we can give the board a more clear picture in case there's any other information needed. So with that, once again, stop me if we need to stop and I start to ramble on. If not, I'd like to get into that component. We do have, working through PowerPoint, we have 2 of our community groups here. We normally see LMYA, McCungy Ambulance, and the fire service as part of their grant requests. So with that part, I'll just quickly review. Can you give us PowerPoint? I'll quickly review both of those. And if you have any questions for everyone from there. LMYA, we continue to meet quarterly, and I think our discussions have been very, very robust. And it's nice to get a lot of detailed information from the organization. And years ago, there were requests on the financial side for contributions directly. As we've talked for the last year with this board and their board and representatives, we're thankful that we can work to contribute with those type of in-kind improvements in parks and spaces that may be beneficial. So you'll see the ask in your budget book. We did meet with the group to discuss further and really what we're looking to propose, and we'll see it in the capital budget later this evening. Would like to make some improvements in parks, one of them being to a batting cage at Church Lane, upgrading that in the amount of $25,000, as well as there's been some requests for like a Toro, like a mule, to incorporate in, as well as we've had some discussions internally as a staff and with LMWA representatives about potential for Quarry Park to have some lights at that infrastructure down there on the between fields 1 and then 2. So for 2023, we've completed some additional projects as our in-kind components. We updated some fencing over at Spring Ridge Crossing in the softball field there. And we've done some replacements on Church Lane to the ball field, regrading the infield with some partners, both with LMYA, the school, and Sailors Landscaping to update that facility. During that facility being out of service a little bit, we made some infield improvements at Quarry Lane Field 1. So those were part of the in-kind things that we've looked to accomplish for this year. So representatives are here. If the board would have any questions, I think we're on the same page and moving forward, unless I missed anything that we may or may not need to address.
Any questions for LMYA in particular? I just have one. Hi, Lindsay. How are you? Bruce and I were having this discussion before. At this point in time, is there any programming of flat field sports between fields 2 and 3 at Quarry? Or is it just baseball all the time? Like football in the fall or spring or both? Both. Okay, perfect. That was the only question. There you go. There's the answer.
Good to go.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Unless there's anything else. All right.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on then. And Chris is here as well from McConjay Ambulance. Somewhere.
He's there.
We received their request in addition to their normal $35,000 contribution. There was some requests for some additional equipment upgrades for the new incoming ambulance. We did budget in that line item for the service an $85,000 allotment. We have no issues with the request. We think it's mindful with the challenges facing EMS at the time and future. We're fortunate that McConjay Ambulance is providing exceptional service and isn't facing those type of issues that other EMS agencies are. But we want to make sure we're ahead of the curve here and supporting them as we should be. So, miss anything, Chris? Anything else on the ambulance side?
Any questions on McConjay Ambulance?
Just a comment.
Sure.
Yeah,
Commissioner
as
Ward.
always, Chris, very much appreciate what you and your team does for the township. Keep up the good work.
For your support, our success and reflection of support of yourself, community leaders, and all of the values. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. All right. We're good. Move on there, Mr. Manager.
Excellent. So you'll see in front of you the tentative schedule just to have a review. We will finish up that community and economic development portion of the general fund. We have Mr. Jones and Mr. Tranguch here. We'll talk sewer funds, solid waste, capital projects, any general topics the board has that we may have missed or that you need additional input on. And then for anyone, if you want to stay or have a further in-depth discussion, as I said, the debt service, open space, liquid fuels, and the general fund, streets, parks, and recreation. So by all means, we're here to provide that assistance. So I'm just going to jump right in. We like to do a little bit of a review of each department, where they are, things that have changed in their funding, and hopefully that's helpful to the board. So of course, the Department of Community and Economic Development, that's our planning, code enforcement, fire inspection team, works through the land development, zoning, stormwater oversight, and sewerage administration. So that department is staffed by 10. There's a director and a deputy. There is a full-time code specialist position. We have budgeted for a zoning officer that has remained unfilled as we are seeking potential applicants for the last year. The water resource sewage enforcement officer comes under the purview of this department, even though his position is funded by the sewer budget. 2 administrative professionals, and then 3 code specialists that are part-time. One's primarily fire, And then the other two gentlemen help us with all things code, planning, et cetera. Some of the things that the department accomplished in 2023, we're still closing out longstanding land development projects, stormwater, MS4 updates. These escrows, as we told the board last year, have been, over a decade that we've been holding them. So we're working to clean those up and close out those long-term plans. We did administer, of course, all of these are year to date, 18 land development applications and 8 conditional uses that have been before us. Work to update the Chapter 27 stormwater resilience modifications, updated the HE zoning district mixed use, and then those stormwater chapters. We did see 25 zoning hearing board applications year to date. We're working to continue to update our community development software and add things like sewer permits. We added the fire inspection program. Land development came online this year. We're still looking to do more with street tree permits, road openings, et cetera. So we'll continue to build that out, but we've made progress this year. So we look to close out half the outstanding building permits that we had dating back to 2015. They were open and not in compliance. So we've made strides there as well. Part of the assistance of the department includes the coordination of the MS4 work. We have those projects this year, Wild Cherry, Princeton Road, and Harvest Fields, between Nate Jones and Zach Graves. They coordinate with our consultants and work with the Public Works Department, and that keeps them fairly busy. I would note, and interestingly enough, with our updated numbers here, department handled 239 zoning permits, 618 building permits that included 30 new homes, 298 residential alterations, 67 solar panels, 21 pools, and 158 commercial permits. So we also received 324 code complaints. Those are responses to resident requests that have been entered into the computer at this point to the year. And they've performed 469 relevant building inspections. So I think that that's a fairly robust accomplishment for basically 2 full-timers and 3 part-times in that side of the department. So we continue to be mindful of where building permits are going and how we appropriately staff. We can talk about that more in a minute. The community and fire and life safety program, that is one of our part-time individuals. We were able to do 134 inspections for the year. That puts us on pace to get to every commercial facility every 2 years as per what was adopted by the code. So that program continues to be a success since we brought that in-house. We added, as we advised the board at the beginning of the year, part of the multifamily dwelling common areas. We were seeing a lot of feedback from the fire services about false alarms, things of that nature that they encountered. So these inspections work through to check hallways and common areas to make sure that fire and smoke alarm systems and emergency lighting and exit signage are present and working appropriately. We've continued to organize our property record files. We're looking to continue this for next year. All of our commercial building plans are to be digitally scanned, and you'll notice that in your capital IT budget line item, that does include that scanning, the cost for Reynolds to perform it. Some of the things we want to look at in 24, we want to continue the zoning look back. We do have some draft feedback. We want to keep taking those forward. Those long-term projects continue to be something where we want to take at least 4 or 5 at a time as we get time through finance plus permitting. Final design on the MS4 projects, and you'll see those in the capital budget. Spring Creek, Swale, Hills of Lockridge, and then the Fairways also has another improvement project. We want to start the Saldo update process and potentially look to request proposals for that mid-year. so that we can start work and then implement any updated saldo. Our staff continues to train and become certified in additional topics. We look to continue that forward, both with our initiative and our incentive program that we have that rewards both our part-time and full-time employees with some additional one-time pay bonuses for part-time and a salary adjustment for full-time whenever we complete certain certifications. So we've seen that that's been beneficial to the department, as several new certifications have been obtained this year after that program went into effect. We do want to continue to look at our search for the zoning officer. We're hopeful that we will be able to fill that position at some point. Those duties have been split between the director and deputy director most of the year. I think, as you see in that permitting workload, that 900 documents are basically coming between building permits and the 200 plus zoning permits are being actively managed by that one position. So in addition to all the other duties, we're hopeful that we can find something. We'll keep the board updated. We also want to come up with an interactive zoning map tool on the township website so that it can be easier for our residents and contractors to just go find property that they're looking at and have that information about how it links to our current zoning. So would like to look at a rental registration program, much like the life safety inspection program. We want to make sure that we're starting to gather the necessary data on rentals that could be of assistance to both fire and the department, as we definitely receive most of our landlords are extremely good for the township. Some, of course, we have those instances where it's difficult to have a response from them. So a rental registration at some point at least gives us a contact for who we can speak to and try to assist them through certain things. We're also going to look to administer our major land development projects, including those things like Lehigh Valley Town Center, Top Golf.
Is there some part of the district state?
The registration? Not at this point. We're looking at how we can kind of have that a little bit streamlined on some paperwork we already take for the moving permit process and some of the other items that we currently have. So it might, but we're trying to work through an analysis on how that'll impact us. Just thought it'd be always interesting to see those sources of revenue in a chart. Always the biggest for us. You'll see the components of building permits, commercial and residential. We're always a little bit concerned about where they are, how those numbers will trend with this economy. We've added a couple revenue items for clarification. We think it'll make it easier for the board and the public to see. We added that escrow processing, $1,500. We actually did that mid-year this year when the board adopted a cost on the fee schedule for that. So if you have excessive escrows that need processed, that fee kicks in. The plan recording fee, that always used to be the responsibility of the township's engineering consultant to record plans as part of the process. Our internal staff have been handling that, and we do have and propose to continue to have a fee for taking those documents to the courthouse, making sure they're in compliance and having them recorded. So you'll see 362-380 zoning hearing board application fees. At one time, these application fees in 2023 actually were included in the zoning permit line item. So instead of having the $23,000 shown there, we broke part of them in half and thought it was more representative of having the application fees in that line item. So that's a new line item for us. As I said, the building permits, residential, we reduced from 210,000 to 175, as well as commercial, we reduced from 380 to 285. We find this is a fairly significant, $135,000 reduction. We continue to watch the market. Some of the land development plans that we have in process, are moving forward, but we're not confident. Well, I'm not confident that they will come to fruition in the 2024 year. So we really want to look at this number as if the economy continues to go where it is with mortgage rates and new construction, something we should watch with that staffing and, the overall cost that the department's seeing. We reduced the building permit plan review fee, like we said, because of the unknowns in building. And then that zoning permit category, where we decreased from 24 to 13.5, that is the separation of those application fees from the actual permits. So some of our expenditures, the biggest, of course, salaries, what we do to our alternate, or what we provide to our alternate inspector. So you'll see that I have alternate residential and commercial inspections lumped together, that 243,000. The engineering for this side for planning, planning studies, which is the consultant, 50,000. And then all the smaller categories like minor equipment, phones, vehicle repairs, things of that nature. Salaries and wages, a couple things on the expenditures. That part-time, we did increase from 84,000 to 129. Once again, that's for those 3 staffing positions. We feel that that's a fairly conservative number at this point, with the hours that we're seeing some of the part-time able to work. So I think we have some room in that number. However, that does give us, if we find some additional part-time employees, that gives us the availability to move them forward and have them be part of our operation. The alternate commercial inspector, as I said, that is our third party. We decreased that from 195 to 189. And I would note to the board, as we reduce the commercial and residential building permits, you would think that there could be potential for more of a significant reduction in this number. However, we need to be mindful that we take the permit fee in a current year, and then our third party that we pay, it may take a year to build that. So we have those, what we would say, carryover projects that are midstream, where we still are going to have the third party inspection fees. So we account for them there. So that's why you don't see as much of a dramatic reduction in that category. That salary and wages again, and then the planning studies from 25 to 50. So where we think we are for 2023, we think we're going to be around 594,000 unless we see some increase in building. And I think on a quick expenditure number, 675. So you can see we're about 80,000 negative. This is the first time in the last couple of years the department, is we need to be mindful it won't cover its expenses through permitting. Couple things with that the board should be mindful of is, at some point, do we have to think about adjusting permitting fees to cover more of those costs? We're not kind of recommending at this point any kind of adjustments. We want to be mindful of the resident side, at least on those additions and that alteration part. We'll continue to crunch the numbers to look at new residential construction and those commercial sides, but we're trying to be mindful of that impeding progress as well, the cost of permitting. So just want to put it in the long-term side on the board. We know we have some additional large-scale projects still coming. And at some point, though, if that's 3 or 4 years, we want to be in a right staffing position so we're not overstaffed as well for that. So we are trying to take that into account. Any questions about code and community development, or community development, code, building, fire and life safety?
Any questions? I have one question, and I guess it's really for Vince more than anybody else. But so going through all of that, all the work that's been done, which is, clearly you guys have a lot of free time on your hands. are you sufficiently staffed right now for what your role is and what your job is? Like, it looks like it's a lot for a very little amount.
I think as Bruce said, we're always, Nathan and I are always proactively managing our staffing, what we have coming in, what's going out. I think at this point, we are still looking for a zoning officer position to fill that position. But I think, staffing as we are today is effective. But I think as we look, to the future, to implement these other programs, we may need to find an uptick in staff, depending as well on the economy. Like Bruce said, we do have a lot in the pipeline, but that doesn't mean it's all gonna go. So,
Sure.
we look at that monthly. We look at, in 3 months, we're gonna say, okay, where are we at? Did we get the permits came in that we expected, especially next year? And I think that's why, as a department, we decided on part-time. That way it gives us that flexibility.
Sure.
And I think at this point, we are effectively managing it, but, only time will tell.
Very good. We don't want to burn you guys out though. That's especially if there's, and again, we're not in the business of generating revenue, but I also don't want us to be in a position where things are going by the wayside because we can't get to everything. And if it's a staffing issue, then we have to work on that for the future. Just so that we're being as effective, I guess, as we can be to meet the needs of everybody.
Right, and I think to that point, we really aren't looking right now, like Bruce said, to raise any fees. We're not at that point. We're managing our fees. But I really think that our residents, they're very fair to what services we offer. I really think, especially the services we offer in-house with our in-house staff, as well as our third party. But it's very fair. We do a lot of consults that are not included. We include a lot in the permit cost. So I think we offer a great service here.
So you think the zoning officer is doing okay?
I think so. No, I definitely, Nathan and I discussed, we all discussed how we were going to handle this. And so I think for me, and Nathan, it gives us a chance to really get a hands-on approach and a view of what comes in, what has been coming in, and how we can modify any processes in the future, right? Instead of having someone just jump in and turn everything over, we get a chance to get a better look at everything.
And interestingly, I would say we're fortunate that our part-time staff are very seasoned and they bring a lot of qualifications to the table with backgrounds in zoning plus, planning plus code and building inspections. So I think it's been beneficial to have that with our other full-time talent that we have here as we work to develop that out. It's been a good basis and a teaching side for that too. I think that we've been fortunate, at least on that end, that we knew bringing on staff that may not be as far ahead on certifications and building inspections, but they had excellent other features with code and backgrounds in construction. I always say it takes 5 to 8 years to get an inspector where you want them to be, if you're starting from the ground up. And on the zoning side, I mean, you're looking at 7 to 10 years if you bring somebody in that's never done that side of this business. So it's been good, I think, to have that kind of part-time reference to make that a little more robust for us and help us on that side.
That was a tough question to answer because of the economy. Trend is that we're slowing down a little. Give a response to what you said, Bruce. We're fortunate with the seasoned people we're coming in, but we're just pushing off what's coming at us because they're all my age, and older. So sooner or later, they're going to drop off, and unless you get someone in of the same experience. You could get them on, or you could have the young person being geared up, fill that position that you don't have to count on good luck. And you find somebody that can walk right in.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be something where we come back to the board with that staffing plan where we may find, if we can find talent that needs to be developed, to get them in here while we can and start to build that process. And, you know, we had a conversation actually today about it, you know, for people out there, this is a good track for employment, you know, become interested. If you're interested in a trade, if you have a background, you know, municipalities, not just here, but everywhere, are looking for planners. They're looking for zoning officers. They're looking for building inspectors. This is a niche market. At some point, you know, my concern is if we don't find that talent that we can develop out, it will be so thin with professionals that have that background as we see those retirements that it's going to the price of those professional positions are going to be so elevated, you know, and even if you go third party, you're now competing with third parties that they also have overhead and expenses. So those hourly rates, I think, are going to continue to drive up, and it's a critical thing for government that we need to think about too, long term, how we compete with the private sector and you know, how we approach things as employers.
But it is the way of the world, contracting out. Third parties are contracting. And most companies are really increasing that.
Yeah, and
So it's
yeah, it's difficult. I mean, and I hope we don't, you know, I have talent sitting right to my left, and I'm hoping at some point, you know, we continue to be a place where I don't lose talent to third parties in that nature, or other municipalities where, you know, planners are in the $120,000 bracket. And, you know, I want to make sure that we keep our talent here on that. It's hard to compete for us. So, yeah, I mean, it is the nature of going to consultants and going to other outside professionals. Good. Any other questions?
Okay, any other questions?
Good, Vince?
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.
Vince.
Thanks, Nate. You have anything else, Nate, on that?
No, thank you very much for everybody's support, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight, but thanks to Bruce for his continued leadership and mentoring. You know, honestly, it's been a good year. It's been a busy year, and while we're I don't want to say apprehensive, but we're cautious about what next year will bring. We have a good team, and we're very lucky to have that.
Nate, I would have asked you that question. I forgot you were there. So I apologize. You've been so quiet. And now he's muted himself.
He's
so
still quiet.
Probably talking, but
There you
doesn't know it.
No, I just have background noise going on. For once, Commissioner Higgins, I'm being quiet, so that's good.
Well done. Well done. All right.
All right, let's move on to sewers. We'll talk about this in depth. So a little bit about the sewer fund. That is our 08 fund in your book. For everyone at home, the sewer fund is separate from those general fund budget items that we were just speaking of. So it's in a totally separate budget. So this covers our sewer crew, our billing, our admin for sanitation, and one of our big categories that we'll see the cost that for the Lehigh County Authority to treat wastewater. So just a little bit of background about our system. We have 125 miles of pipe, over 4,000 manholes, all things under the ground that you don't ever see, but they're very important to all of us every day. We have a full-time sewer crew chief. They report to the Director of Public Works. There's 4 full-time sewer crew members. We have that sewer enforcement officer, as we said. They are funded out of this budget, but fall under the purview of community and economic development, as well as assist Public Works with any questions that they can, kind of as a liaison about sewers. We have an administrative staff. The Assistant Director of Finance, 50% of her salary is funded by this budget. And the Administrative Assistant in Public Works, 50% of her salary, since half of the work she does, entails with sewer and questions of those things. We have an outside firm that, performs our invoicing for that component and the management, of that. So, I would note, that you could always probably, and we don't, with a level of work, towards sewers that I've been working on in the last, year or two, technically probably a component of the manager's salary could be in there, like they are at some other places. However, we have this fairly lean, so.
One question about
Mhm.
that stuff. I noticed, that the audit fee is getting spread out between some of the funds. And why isn't audit being included in this particular?
So audit actually is part of the both the general fund plus in this one 402-311, which is accounting and auditing services, as well as now we've added that to the solid waste fund. So accounting is covered by part of that. You will notice the fees for accounting have gone up. We hear in the market that that is also another area to expect those type of increases. So.
But it's not part of this fund.
It is. So if you look at 08-402-311, that is part of the sewer financial administration. We have budgeted 15,000 in that line item. That is slightly up from 10,000 to the 15 with the increased cost.
Nope. You go past.
Okay.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, and we can speak a little bit more about that. There is certain breakdowns in that component. You'll see the payroll processing, so that is a component for that service, as well as payments. So if people do pay with credit card or things of that nature, which we encourage, that's also in there. That payment processing line item. Of course, you'll see that through the general government fund as well for people that are doing things with recreation or making other payments. So those categories we try to keep consistent over the various funds. So some of the things we did in 2023, we implemented some new tech into manhole inspections. We did partner with Arcadis, who is the authorities, Lehigh County Authorities engineering group. They have a digitized manhole inspection process that's actually, we're hoping to share it with everybody else in the LCA system. I know that our friends in Upper Macungie are also looking to implement. It allows for tablets or iPads. We can be down in the manhole with that technology. We can capture photos. We can complete an online form. So we're excited about that. We just trained in August for the rollout, and we're starting to get that implemented. We did place a new video camera on the sewer truck, on the camera truck into service this year. That was part of the capital budget. So far, we've looked at 236 sewer lateral inspections. 10 have failed for the year to date. That is down. I want to say we were a little over, I think, 300 for 2022. So we're seeing that trend. And just for the public's awareness, anytime you have a residential unit, when it sells as part of that process, it's necessary that you perform a video inspection or have your plumber perform a video inspection of the lateral to see if there's any deficiencies. So that's actually, if you look at that, as kind of directly related to those building transfers. Also, there's a time period where you don't need to have that done. I believe we're 5 years here. So those houses that have transferred might have already seen that inspection. And there's no cost for that. We just review the data and then get back to the applicant. At this point, we've flushed 31,680 feet of sewer line, and we also televised that amount. Normally doing that weekly. We looked at 198 manhole inspections. As we said, most of them were on paper. However, we're looking at that new component. So we're on track. Most of these are on a 10-year plan for TVing plus inspection. So the township's divided up, and that's how that information and that work is divided. We're continuing, and we've worked this year to update the 537 plan. The 537 plan is adopted by the township as part of our interim 537 plan. There is necessary work and source reduction in those plans over the next several years for us to be compliant with our plan. The engineer is working on a total of how much the costs are for all of those items. In case the board would like some clarification, we'll have that for you in the future. We complete one call, so our staff goes out anytime someone 811s. We go and locate our sanitary sewer services. That keeps us fairly busy. We updated our sewer allocation fees, and we're actually in the process of updating potentially fees for next year. This is based on the costs when they do a cost factor on all of the things on the engineering side to increase those allocations. We also have to look at potentially the authority is raising their rate for extra strength charges. Those are in cents, usually like 35 cents a pound for some of these biosolids, or 40 cents. They're going up, I think the authority is going up 12%. So we're making sure we have those numbers, and we're going to have to include those as part of a rate. So we do the authority inspects those and samples those entities. They then pass through that billing for service. So we don't want to be in a situation where we're being charged more than what we bring in. So we will have an adjustment on that component at a minimum to represent or reflect their fee. And we're going to place the new jet truck in service probably by, I think it's going to be the end of November. So we will see that goal accomplished. What do we want to do in 2024? Continue to repair and line manholes in our inspection program. We're aware of at least 3 down in the hills of Lockridge that'll have to be raised, have the barrels raised, and have some significant lining and keep them above the flood zone down there. Always, we do manhole frames and risers. That's part of your budget line item that calls that out specifically. As we said, the manhole inspections and the TV flushing plan. And then we need to look and work with our partners at the LCA about the long-term capacity, and we'll mention that again as part of this. So where does the money from this fund come from? This year we're budgeting $350,000 in interest earnings, $5,000 in sewer connection permits. We did assume on sewer charges $4,935,000. We assumed a 5% rate increase, and we'll see that number. I have approximately 300, but it's about 233,000. Our rate currently, what we bring in currently, is about 4.7 million. Those extra strength charges, as we said, that's what we're charged by the authority to treat those extra strengths in the system. Penalties, wastewater allocation if someone has a new construction or has new allocation required. Sewer certs, those are the certs issued when houses transfer, say that their bills are paid or not paid. On-lot permits are 1,000. A little bit about the rates and the background of that, and Mr. Waltmeyer's provided kind of a breakdown on sewer billings for your reference. So we bill about 11,145 customers for sewer service, and you'll see on the handout provided, that's our number of customers category, usage, fixed residential, fixed apartment, is where that number's derived from. A typical customer uses approximately 12,000 gallons a quarter, and you would see a current rate of about $86.20 per quarter. A 5% rate increase would amount to an additional $420 a quarter. $4.20 a quarter, for a total of $90.40. So $361.60 for an average residential customer, $344.80 for this current year. So the difference in that math, as you see before you, is approximately $233,000. If you choose not to initiate a rate increase, be necessary to either cut $233,000 from the I&I side improvements or utilize $233,000 fund balance. I would say in response to, questions we had Thursday, I definitely won't crash the sewer fund budget. We are positioned there. However, I would always be mindful that as part of our rate study over the next 10 years, we needed to continue a rate increase so that we're where we need to be on the long term. I would say that we should continue, whether we raise the rate or don't raise the rate, to look maybe in the third quarter again next year to have another rate study from PFM, who provided where we are, to make sure that we're on track. We should have some more clarity from the Lehigh County Authority on where they are with their cost and rate analysis. They've retained a firm, Raftellus, that has been working with a manager group internally to look at cost sharing. Interestingly enough, one of the items discussed is trying to get bills simplified from the authority, and basically, as one suggestion, going to a per gallon rate. So what you treat is what you send is what gets treated, which is what the rate would be based on. Hopefully, if other municipalities in the authority system will get on board, it would be the same rate for everyone for that base rate that we would pay to the authority for treatment and transport. So we will see, and it's something on one of my final slides. We will see the authority. They're working on the outreach about where the projects are and the timing for projects. I'd like to have them, if the board's available, for our November 27th workshop. That's going to work out for them, but we wanted to get the word out about sewers to the public and you as elected officials as soon as we can. So that's a little bit about the rate and the rate sheet. I think what Jeff's provided here is pretty detailed on how a typical customer is billed and what the usage is.
A couple of questions. We've done the interim 537, but there's a full 537 plan that I believe is due in 2025.
I think it's 2025 to keep us on schedule. Yes, the
But
board
what-
the board would have to adopt by fall of 24, I think, for a 25 submission.
Okay, and so that is primarily being led by LCA. Is that correct?
That is correct, along with all of us in the room as signatories. So we have been in attendance at those meetings.
So you have been involved in the discussions, and you feel that they're adequately open and listening to what you have to say.
Yes. And they are looking for that feedback. So we appreciate that. What it seems like we're providing is of value to them.
Okay, and the other thing is, yeah, I do support the 5% increase in the rate. The overall billing is based on a fixed price plus the volume rate. And when you're going through and reviewing the rates, you ought to consider what kind of increases in the fixed portion ought to be included as well.
And you'll see in that component, in the fixed rate per quarter, and I'm sorry I didn't put it on the slide too, that usage per 1,000 gallons is $1.70. Currently it's $1.60. But those fixed rates are currently 67 for a regular usage, proposed to go to 70, 100 in a fixed residential to 105, and then a fixed apartment condo from 89 currently to 93. So as part of the analysis that finance did complete, that's included in there.
As far as doing the analysis in the future, when does it make sense to do the variable piece and when does it make sense to do the fixed piece? What are they included?
When we looked at and we had our study done, it was to look at both overall. So, Jeff, unless you want to speak to timing.
Hmm?
Both of them.
Oh,
Jeff,
the
can you
5%
just-
is
can
for
you just
apply on
talking-
both of them.
Jeff,
Okay.
you just talking to the
Yeah.
microphone.
Yep, both of them are going up about 5%.
Oh, okay.
So both the flow rate is going up and the fixed.
Anything else? Good.
No, that's-
So just kind of a breakdown to show where this is and how these are derived. There is your regular charges, your extra strength connection permit. The bulk of this fund is or are those regular charges. So everything else is fairly small in comparison to that. Some of the expenditures we had, as we previously discussed, that finance admin. So that's all of the things with the payroll processing, the auditing, that finance type administration. We do have some legal in there. I think that's a conservative number. We don't get a lot of that unless we have to start enforcement. However, I am mindful that we will need legal for our future agreements here with the authority as we negotiate those with our other signatory partners. So I would ask that stays in. I'm hopeful that will be enough to cover that side of it. The sewer admin part, engineering, 75,000, buildings and facilities. That's the heat and light for where the sewer operations stored over there in Public Works. And then that permit staff, that is the sewage enforcement officer. You'll notice that is an increase from the current rate. We are looking that can be realized by passing certain certifications plus an average bump. So we're hopeful with the successful completion of them that we'll get to that number. The large part of the expenditures, collection and treatment. So that includes our in-house staff that you saw, with the majority of it going to the Lehigh County Authority, a little over $2.3 million. The authority is starting to complete capital projects. There are some that have been, I don't want to say on the back burner, but we've been waiting for supplies and materials like a generator. That was like $1 million project for this year that was back ordered. So we're starting to see an increase in spending in that line item. Before we had budgeted and anticipated it, and then those things didn't move forward. We are going to see the debt financing. Hopefully, if we finish our agreement with the authority for that, the bypass, the Trexler bypass line, which is the one that goes through Grange and down through Upper Macungie. So there is a cost to the Western Lehigh partners for that situation. So I would say before too, the authority had a process called True Up, and True Up for them to, it's mentioned in our agreements for them to clear their books. They used to have to do a calculation where they returned additional dollars as part of the True Up process, usually in like July of the following year. At this point, the signatories have been in agreement that instead of getting that True Up credit back, at this point, the authority would keep that True Up dollars for capital improvements. Interestingly enough, in 2023, the first year or 2022, which we would have seen in 2023 where we agreed to do this, it actually, with some of the capital projects, we were negative 600 and some $1,000. So the True Up really went back to cover the expenses. So that was the first time where they thought that part of those capital dollars would be available, and they actually were required to complete the things that were on the table. So before as Jeff always says, I would caution the board. We would budget that number, a little bit higher, thinking that we would get the true up and have those monies available. That is what built fund balance a little bit for us, but I think that's going away. So I would note that that's kind of where we are with it. So besides the collection treatment, we have insurances, and then employee benefits and healthcare. And you'll notice that big part of the pie chart is the sewer treatment to the authority, capital projects, which we have in there. And we'll look at those, the benefits and insurances, and then a lot of the other things are of a smaller situation. Capital projects, we did propose this year, two projects. 1,420,000. Part of those projects included, as we've talked about at numerous workshops, a contribution to Upper Macungie for the straightening of the line that comes behind the middle school on Lower Macungie Road and Mill Creek. Basically, we flow into that line, and we think, for the rewards that we get out of having that straightened with capacity, it's worth it for us to look at 50% of that number. That job is out to bid. The last update I got from Upper Macungie, they've confirmed that this number should be in the ballpark. If anything, it might be a little bit higher. About 180,000 would be on the table, but they're waiting for those numbers to come back on where we may be. They're appreciative. They've talked with their board as well, and they like I said, are appreciative of our continued partnership with them. We have nothing in any agreements that require us to do that prior to the Trexlertown agreement that we have before the board. I just want to make that clear as well. Nothing is making us do that. However, our flows do go into that line. So the other component is that cured in place plastic pipelining, SIP, as we call it. We'd request from the board $1,260,000 to try to complete 22,000 feet of lining. This year we were able to do 11,000 feet, which left us 44,000 feet of clay in the system. This would allow us to get at least half of it done in our time frame. We would have half of that remaining, and then we would need to start to focus on manhole repairs and sewer laterals, sewer lateral replacement. So trying to get this part completed. There are things in the source reduction that require us to do these types of projects as part of that. And I would say, as we've already successfully seen, and it was mentioned Thursday, the reduction in I&I and flows in there. If we look to a component where the township is charged by the authority for gallons that are processed, always going to be advantageous that we have as least amount of gallons going there as possible. So if that billing occurs at some point in the future, within the next 5 years, and that mindset changes, this is helpful to us, as well as updating. It's not a glamorous project. None of the residents probably ever see it, but maintaining our underground infrastructure is important. So some of the highlights and where we're going as we discuss, and we'll continue to do that. We want the public to know we should be mindful of the Lehigh County Authority and those increased costs. They are those capital improvement components that we're starting to see, that 30 years on certain fixtures in their system that are now needing replaced. The large scale LCA long-term project could be a lot of zeros behind that first number. We'll see further once some additional options are kind of chosen. And as we said about having the authority come in to have that meeting and start public outreach and work to have elected officials start to engage elected officials higher up for some dollars for grant funding and things of that nature to try to reduce those costs. So, as we said, the credits on the portions with that, or the true up credit And then, as I said, try to reevaluate rates in the third quarter to make sure we're going where we're going. We don't want to raise things if we don't have to. And if we take a step back at that point, just make sure we're in the right direction. So, any questions about sewer budget, rate analysis, capital projects?
Okay, questions on sewer?
Yeah, I got a
Yes,
Question.
Commissioner Beitler.
So that 1,260,000 CIPP, that's the I budget then.
Correct.
And did we really jack it up?
We
this year?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Because we're normally what, 750, 800,000, 850.
Correct. We spent a little over, I want to say $1 million this year because of the truck purchase. We had capital projects in there, this year that inflated our current number. But yes, we're normally around 700.
To 800,000.
Yeah,
And then the 5% increase, approximately $250,000 we'll get out of that, 230 to 240.
correct. About 233.
140,000.
Yeah,
So even if we would drop down the I to $1 million, which is more than we ever invested in that, we wouldn't have to raise the rates 5% and the budget wouldn't be touched. The term I used last week was crash the budget.
correct.
So
Yeah.
we will not crash the budget and we'd still be putting $1 million into the system.
Correct.
Which is a lot.
But then, okay, we're gonna have big expenses in the future. And so do we hold off and then make a big increase later? The idea of the 5% is to gradually start building toward the future expenses. It's not really to offset this year's budget.
Well, I'm looking at to offset the budget because we don't have to build toward that because you are absolutely correct. There's a big bomb coming at us. And is it better to give this year and when the bomb goes off, or when the bomb goes off, everybody's going to get it, not just Lower Macungie Township. So, and I think in comparison to the other municipalities right next door, we put a lot into our system. We made great improvements. So it's what I would like to see is we'd still put $1 million into it. We wouldn't have to raise the sewer fee next year.
Let me ask this question just out of curiosity, because obviously I've been up here a long time and we've had this discussion many, many times. And it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't type situations. I've always been very much in support of making sure the infrastructure is kept up to date so that we're doing our part, but we've also discussed a lot about how our partners don't necessarily do the same thing. And when it comes to it in the end, we're going to get hit with as much of it as everybody else is. What if we didn't spend the $1.2 million on I&I this year at all? And just said, we've done it I've been up here for 10 years. We've done it every year for 10 years. What if we just said for a year, we're not going to do that?
You would be not compliant with your source reduction plan and 537 interim plan that goes to the state DEP. The DEP, as they continue to convey to us and the rest of the partners, if we choose to not address I&I, at this point, there is no consent order. However, there would be a consent agreement that would come down, and the DEP could do several things. They could, number one, fail to approve any new planning modules, which means you would not get any more allocations from the DEP.
Right.
The second thing that they could do is they could put us under that consent order and they could demand that we do certain things. And we've been trying to accommodate to not go under that agreement. And the other thing that we would need to be mindful of is I don't know what their enforcement as far as fines and penalties, but they have that capacity being the DEP. So what they continue to stress that I&I, and we have these conversations because I think they're very relevant. You know,
Yeah.
we're going to see these things where we have to upsize pipe and do all these things. We're going to have these costs. So why not just allow us to move forward and take the cost that way? To which they say, yeah, well, we don't want you treating rainwater. Your plan is to treat sewer and we don't want to
Sure.
see that. So that's what we have to be mindful of.
Then I guess the logical follow-up question is, what is the minimum we have to do to stay in compliant with all of that?
And that's the part I'll make sure and I'll confirm what's in the source reduction. But, ultimately they are aware of the quantity of pipe that needs lined. They're aware of the laterals from years ago, 15 years ago or 10 years ago that need to be addressed. So they are aware that those things have to be moving forward. I think for us to get an approved 2025 plan, they are watching to make sure that that's being accomplished. So I would have to see how that stretches out over the next, what we have for the interim plus that next phase.
Yeah.
To have those realistic things. And, I would note, with our neighbors, both boroughs, and I'll call them out because they've been the call outs for the signatories, both Albertus and McCungy. They've completed all of their I&I. They've floated bonds. They've completed millions of dollars of work. And they've now they're down to low hanging fruit, as we call it, to finalize where they are. Our partners at Upper, in the Western Lehigh, Upper, Lower, Albertus, McCungy, we continue to make strides. I'm sure the rest of the board here, the board can assume the rest of the communities that I haven't mentioned in the Valley that may be not addressing their I&I in a certain way. And I think that we need to be mindful that the DEP is also going to come for us as the collateral damage for our neighbors that haven't finished their work.
Do we have any idea what, I guess, the penalties or the repercussions have been for those communities or partners that haven't kept up with what they're supposed to be doing? I mean, and again, anecdotally, or, I'm not saying in concrete, I'm just curious. And these are just questions about, like, if you threw a complete monkey wrench into the system, what actually is the punishment?
The threat is the DEP will shut down all allocations.
Okay.
That's whether they have that standing, considering we have a plan that we're becoming compliant with. That's always the question with the other signatory groups of, okay, if you're going to continue down this path and not address things, like the rest of us in this room are not going to go down on allocations and things of that nature with the rest of you. So that is the elephant in the room. What happens to these individuals? And like I said, the DEP made it fairly clear what was going to happen. The interesting part is we are seeing communities that are now turning that corner and aggressively getting on this program. And they may be behind. However, even the city is now looking to address in an aggressive manner their I&I work. So those threats, whether they're veiled or not, seem to be making the rest of the valley.
They're making a difference at this point. We think they seem to be, because it's, and Commissioner Butler brought it up before. We had this conversation probably 6-7 years ago, where it was going to be, there were going to be tanks all over the place, and this is going to happen, and it was always the threat of, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and we're still sitting here, and none of it has happened. And I always wonder, when you talk about bigger government, does it ever happen?
I would say that this has to happen. It's 100% going to happen. That's why we're going to have the outreach, and the fact that I would say individual sewer rates. If you're less than, I'm hopeful, right? But I'm the pessimist, as the board knows.
Yeah.
If your sewer rate is less than $700 in the next upcoming 8 to 10 years, I would be shocked. And the amount of dollars that we are talking here it's not 100 million. It's substantial. So that's the other component where I always try to at least advise the board. We don't want to be in that debt service for 40 years and still have another $1 million or $2 million worth of projects to do every year, right? That's going to put our rates up even higher. So getting this out of the way as quickly as possible before that 2030 timeframe comes. It has to be in the ground. And it's it's the actual treatment center at Klein's Island. It's the replacement of and upsizing all of the lines in the system, starting down there, pump stations, and the pre-treatment plant, which sits in Upper McConchy. So
And I'm kind of in between both Commissioner Robert and Commissioner Butler. I don't tie one to the other. The sewer rate is a whole separate discussion. We had it last year. We talked about, we don't have to raise sewer rates for the next 10 years, but at some point you're going to have to raise them 35%, or 40%, whatever it was. Kind of what South Whitehall just went through with their solid waste removal, what we're going to be going through next August with our solid waste. I'm trying to think in terms of other things that need to be done here, but we keep throwing millions of dollars into the sewer. Are we still going to get stabbed at the end, even though we've spent all this?
we are. And I would say between trash plus sewer at some point, if residents here aren't paying, if they're paying less than $1,500 a year, I would be surprised. I was just sitting here trying to figure out how many fingers I have to count so that the cost of that project at the authority, because there's a potential for a lot of zeros on it, that I think that would be very very eye-opening.
You're going to be paying 5 times your property tax in sewer fees
Correct.
or solid waste fees or combination.
Correct. Unless, elected officials can start to get to elected officials further up the chain, to get these funding for this projects and where it is. And, rightfully so. I think us as a staff and me as a manager, we never want to raise rates on, our customers. We just don't. It's not, we want to be mindful of the economy that we're in, and how this affects people. And, hey, $16 is, it's $16. I'd rather have that in my pocket, just like I'm sure the residents will. And how do you either taper that to least impact them, or take away that sudden shock of, hey, by the way, your rate's $680 now instead of $300. Do you continue to do that gradual pace?
It's funny. I was driving over here tonight thinking about the budget and thinking about all the things that I'd love to see done, and that haven't been done. And, you come to the conclusion, it's really hard to get things done when you don't ask for any more money than what you have right now. And we're fortunate in the fact that we've never asked for more money from anybody that lives here other than what is being forced upon us. So when you talk about sewer fees or solid waste fees or recycling, those are things forced upon us. We're not asking them to give us money. We're saying it costs more to do it. We've never asked them for more money, at least in the 10 years I've been here. But then you get the pushback on how high everybody's taxes are, and you want to get them to realize that we don't charge you any tax. Like I wish we did, because then I would take the flack for it. But don't blame me for something that I'm not giving to you or I'm not doing to you. And at the same time, don't ask me why, the tennis court isn't, Wimbledon ready, because we don't have the money to do it. It's just not there. It's crazy, but it's interesting. It gets more and more interesting every year, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think we try to position too where we're able, as we've been mindful of these dollars before, we've seen interest rates rise. Now we're in a position where if you look at that 350,000 in interest, that's offsetting that a little bit for the residents. So that would be another 5% rate hike if we had to make up those dollars, and where we are, even with the general fund and the capital budget, as we look at that fund balance we have is allowing us, as we discussed Thursday, to bring forward that 600,000 out of our general fund into the capital projects to help us. That's, 0.25 mils worth of interest, because we've positioned ourselves appropriately that we do have that, and we're fortunate, but that's a way as we have that, a little bit of fund balance in there, that helps our residents kind of soften that tax a little bit.
Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, I just have two things. One is, I do agree with Commissioner Robert about the increase. I don't think any of us, I know none of us up here want to increase rates on any of the residents. I'm going to be increased myself, obviously. That being said, as Commissioner Roberts stated, if we don't start incrementally doing this, we're going to wind up with a ridiculous increase to the taxpayer at some point. It's like you said, it's inevitable. We don't know exactly when. And I feel like it would be, at least it's going to be a little bit more palatable should we do this in a gradual aspect. And again, like President Higgins said, 40% or so, whatever the number is going to be, we just don't know yet. So for that aspect, obviously, I think it's something we should do as much as I don't want to do it, I just think it makes sense.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, my other question was with regard to the SIP lining. So 1.2, and you said we can get, there's 44,000 left. We can get the 22,000 done this year. So essentially, or next year rather. So essentially by 2025, we could be done with that.
Correct. We're hopeful.
That's, to me, it makes sense to do that and get that out of the way and be done with it. That's.
When does the cycle start again?
75 years, 50 to 75 years lifespan on that SIP on the lining. It's
Yeah, but-
basically plastic pipe.
Yeah, but we witnessed that's not guaranteed.
Correct.
We had,
Yeah.
we had 5-year-old CIPP lining fail.
Yep.
And it cost us a bundle to redo it. I don't know.
About 50,000.
Yeah, I don't know if that was out of us or that was insured or we could claim that somehow, but
Yeah.
not to throw a monkey wrench in.
No.
It's not guaranteed,
It's true.
No.
that lining. And, Mr. President Higgins, you really got my mind going, but that's drastic not to put nothing in. When you
No, I
said it.
know. I'm
And then the tennis courts you threw in there and I'm not only gonna say one thing on them.
Yeah.
Today I went up and looked at East Texas tennis court and to me, I'm not a tennis player, but it didn't look bad. It
But,
didn't
yeah,
look bad, but
that one is more of an issue of, it's going to be a long-term issue of tree roots and
right, but now there's,
now
I
it's
think
fine.
there's one little spot on it.
Yeah.
It's like 3 foot long. But anyway, back to the sewers, in your term, I would like to save the stabbing to the end, And, the reason, all of us sitting up here are making these comments is because with our new engineer on, we all got educated a lot better from that last presentation to know what's going on. And, we did make great improvements. We do a lot and now we all understand what's going on instead of just throwing that 800,000 at it every year, not getting any explanation on what we improved. And a lot had to do with the metering what's going on. To address what President Higgins said too, it was about 6 years ago. Everybody that sits here and attends these meetings, that executive order, is that what they call that?
was
Administrative order.
Administrative order was coming at us 8 years ago, the next year. And then when it didn't come at us, we were told by legal, it went away. It disappeared. And it disappeared. It's gone now. How long, President Higgins? It's gone like 6-7 years.
a couple of years.
It's just gone.
Well, the interesting part about the AO is, remember the administrative order actually came from the federal government, the EPA. And as I think that certain agencies were addressed in a certain way, maybe under previous, oversight of the federal government, the EPA went away. However, they definitely grant their powers to the state, and the state has taken up their administrative order with vigor. So we did lose the federal administrative order. However, now we are under the Pennsylvania State DEP's order has now picked up where they left off.
And tonight is the first time I heard, unless somebody else heard, about the penalties if we don't do it.
Well, I don't think we've ever really asked about it.
Right.
And I was just curious because I know there are people that don't do it. Are they actually being penalized, or is it just urban legend? You know, like this could happen to you, but never does.
Well, and I can say in my previous life, we were part of a watershed that had these same type of problems, that they were actually under an enforcement action. And what they chose to do, the DEP in that region chose to say, okay, you have 75 taps a year. And after 75 dwelling unit taps, you're cut off. We'll put you under an allocation. And it ground development up, which is fine for us. I mean, I think we're happy with where we are in development, but when you do get that key project that you want to have, and then all of a sudden there's no allocation, then you're done. So that's one of the parameters that I had to deal with in a previous life, you know, to just say, sorry, no more.
So so we don't drag it all out tonight, I've made a list of things that for Monday's meeting to have kind of a board vote on. You know, one of which is the SOAR rate increase. One of which is the SIP lining budget. You know, do we go all in? Do we go partial way in? So that we can think about it. Because I think there's a lot of good information here. And this is one of those items that I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just what you think is the best way to go. So that at least it's not set in stone in the budget, but we can knock those questions out before we have to come up with the approved budget that gets published. All right, does that work for you?
Yeah, I think that's great. And you know, this is the part of the feedback that we appreciate as a staff, and you gentlemen as being representatives of the people. This is the part where that feedback gets us in the direction, and this policy that we're setting is, you know, definitely the board, you know, it's the great role of that side of it. So we appreciate that to get us in that direction.
I got one more closing comment.
Commissioner Butler.
We'll still be putting $1 million. We don't put the 5% increase to the public. And to be transparent with my fellow commissioners, I'm not in favor of this 5%. Tonight, we'll talk about it more next week, but putting $1 million, it's not being cheap. It's the most we ever spend historically. So even cutting it back to $250,000, we're still putting in that sewer system more than ever next year. If I'm saying something that's not accurate, tell me.
I think you're accurate. You're still doing $1 million worth of work there.
And that we never did that.
Nope.
As long as I've been around. Because
No,
I do follow it every year.
that's the most.
It's the most. That's it.
Okay. Okay.
Good.
We're
Good on sewers. Oh man, I can't wait to talk about the next one. All right. Ooh, solid waste fund.
I have a comment about both of these, but I'm not going to say it.
This will have a good good feel as well. So we'll get a lot of good guidance.
Julie, get ready for this.
So
Not gonna be happy.
what we've recreated here that used to be in the past before my arrival, there was a separate sewer fund. We call that internally the O4 fund. I'm sorry, for solid waste. All I want to talk about sewer now, apparently. Solid waste wasn't its own fund back in the day. It got commingled at some point with the general fund. So what I would like to do, and as we're going to see, and as we need to be mindful of, the rate increases that we may face, that budget is fairly substantial. And I thought it's more transparent and easier to not show an inflated general fund by separating that back out. So as we'll see, you know, the general fund, as we talked Thursday, at this component, this year is about 15 million without the solid waste in there. It's around 12 and a half. So, you know, why have a third or quarter of your budget that just goes to trash collection? So we wanted to separate those revenues and expenditures related to trash collection, yard waste and recycling. we'll continue to talk about this every month probably so that the residents are aware. The cost of trash hauling services is expected to increase significantly at the end of 2024. We'll work on a PR piece as well, is what we're seeing from our neighbors. So a couple things on this fund. How do we create revenue? What funds it? So interest earnings, $1,000. State grants, you'll notice, and there's some further breakdown. State grants, we believe that we have in process right now. One is for a leaf truck, a leaf vac truck, which the board approved the chassis on so we could get it ordered. The other component of state grants, you'll see, and it's been reduced from the general fund under the state grant section, is the performance recycling grant. You see about 100,000 in there. We were close to 125 or 150 this year. So that's the component of state grants. And that reduction out of the general fund is important. Charges for trash service, $4,030,000. Once again, out of a previous on the general fund, out of a $15 million budget, $4 million is pretty substantial. So yard waste permits and fees, this is a new item. And we would love to hear the board's feedback. We talked about it at a workshop once already. We'll get in further detail. There is the state grant breakdown, the recycling performance grant, and that equipment grant. So charges for service, and we've been provided some additional insight from Jeff as far as where we are. There's about 9,300 township dwelling units that are invoiced for service. So in that quarterly invoice and yearly $360, that includes the cost of collection that we pay to waste management, staff and contractor costs for billing services, yard waste activity, the contracted leaf collection, contracted curbside yard waste, all of those things that we currently offer. So about $30 per month, $360 per year. We think from what we're seeing in the Valley and our peers, that the monthly rates may be around $48 a month. Interestingly enough, we need to figure for the last 4 months of the year, as our current provider hauler contract will be up August 31st. So that leaves us September to December. However, for us, it's very hard to put this budget in front of the board, as we have up until February where the hauler could execute a 1-year additional agreement with us. So we're trying to be mindful of that while we have these discussions. So that $48 a month, and not for 2024, right? But in the future, 2025 side, that takes you to $144 per quarter or $576 per year. So that is the factor for that waste hauling component. Our neighbors in South Whitehall saw, I believe, was 60% on a 5-year deal. 3-year deal for them was 52%. So this number is in that range is what we've crunched.
Before you go further, the $90 a quarter, is that a set fee across all residents, or does it depend on the resident?
Set on people that have trash service. So if you're in a private community, you
Right.
don't have
So if-
trash service.
So if waste management picks up at your house, it's $90 a quarter.
That's correct.
All right.
Currently. And I would say something else to be mindful for in that agreement, that's unlimited trash.
Gonna be
That comes with the sewer.
But
That's all in one bill.
yeah, but the other part is, and I think Bruce is getting at that, we're likely to see that type of an increase, but also a significant reduction in service.
Pretty much a single 95-gallon toter. So you're going to go from unlimited, see your garbage bill potentially double, and go from an unlimited to a single toter at the street. So yes, it's very something to be very mindful of. You're going to lose service and pay twice as much for it.
Drastic. We were just fortunate
Yeah,
with our unlimited.
we're gonna hear a lot
garbage.
of picking up bulk items.
Well, I mean, I think they worded unlimited household trash. You could put 20 bags out, household trash, and you see it when you drive around. They pick it up, which we had it good.
Yeah. It's definitely, so with that, like I said, why are we looking at these rates, and why is this changing? That August 2024 number is important to us. We'll have to be ready to go, to put out a garbage bid early in the year, to see where we are, at that point. By the time we advertise, receive, 30 days or 60 days worth of responses, plus another 30 days to go through. We need 4 months minimum to, get where we are. So
Excuse me, Bruce, would that still include e-waste and
maybe,
hazardous waste?
we're going to try. We're going to try and see what the spec comes back at. But Renee's right. We do have those other HHW, household hazardous waste, plus the e-waste.
Is that
We're-
being used heavily?
Yes, we see a lot on the household hazardous waste. We see all kind of quantities of
I
that.
can tell you the e-waste part, to schedule it, it's like months out to get someone to come pick something up.
It is very heavily used. There are a lot of people that use it, and a lot of people are very happy that we offer the service. Just for paints, for batteries, for chemicals that otherwise would end up in a landfill or illegally dumped somewhere. Now there's somewhere that responsible that they could dispose of these items, and they're very grateful to have this program.
We get a lot of positive feedback on those programs, actually. So, but as we said, it's kind of it's hard for me as a manager to bring forward a real definitive number because we don't know what that is, and it's in the middle of the year. So, could change all of these things. We could get a really competitive, garbage rate, and we've had these discussions, and they're a moot point. But I think for us, we're planning or trying to be proactive. Some of the charges for service, right? Knowing that rate is going to go straight to garbage, we have to then figure out how we can support the yard waste center. That's currently done with, part of the fees, from the current, $30 per month that goes towards that. We have 7,000 permits out for the yard waste site. We think, at some point we're going to need to charge a minimum, $50 per permit, to have access to the yard waste site. We realize that is going to be controversial, probably more than the sewer rate, and maybe even the garbage rate. If we alter, the 52,000 trips that we've seen into our yard waste center, in years past on how we look at that. So, we are definitely looking for feedback, on our list of items for next week to follow up on.
Okay, well, there are 9,300 homes that are currently paying for solid waste. And why not charge each of them $40? So $10 per quarter. And, let them pick up their, sticker, whatever is needed, at the township building, but, and then for people that are not covered by that service, then yeah, go ahead and have it be at $50 and, that's what it costs.
Well, and interestingly enough, Jeff, what is the breakdown on the, part of that actually does support that? So currently those 9,300 people are supporting that, and that's how we're able to, make the yard waste go. So, once that, those additional monies aren't available, in that monthly rate, we're going to have a stopgap here. So, you would have to see that rate, that ultimately potentially 576 rate with an additional $40 if you're in that component, or $30 or less, because you'd have more payers than your 7,000 permits. So do you want, or is it, the will of the board to say, for those 2,300 other residents that maybe don't have a permit to the yard waste center, that they should be paying for people that want to use the yard waste center.
Well, okay, they're paying $30 now, right?
That's correct.
And so it would be just appearing, it would be spiking it out so that they're aware of the fact that they're paying it, which they are not now. But by the same token, or along the same lines, you would be getting 9,300 people that would be paying it. And whereas if you say it's $50, and right now it doesn't cost me anything to get a sticker for my car, then that number of 7,000 is going to drop down to 5,000. And so you're going to end up with less.
That's exactly what we
Actually,
want.
I think that we're okay with that.
We
We're
want,
allowed to go.
we want to see the decreases, as you'll see in part of these line items, right? The staffing that it takes there, the equipment that we have to look at, all of these individuals where we appreciate that they come and drop off their one small potted plant as a trip. That is costing us logistics and time, and money to go and grind that up. Right now, if you're one of the 2,300 people or more because actually those 9,300 ratepayers subsidize anybody in the community, whether you have and pay us a garbage bill or not, you are able to get a yard waste permit. So if I live in a private community and have an independent trash hauler that doesn't offer this service, and I come in and I get my yard waste permit, you gentlemen that do pay for the service just subsidized me to be in your yard waste center to dump that off. So does the board want to spread out the goodwill of permits to the 9,300 people? Or do you want to focus on those users, knowing that it's probably going to drop, which we figure we'll see about 5,000 permits. So that $250,000 number is what we're thinking of. Allow them to either elect to charge it on their bill and say, here it is, or have that control is important feedback for how we can go. Do we just want to put it in the bill? We segregate it out as a separate line item. The people that come in that aren't on the trash bill, we'll have to figure out somehow for them to get their sticker and come in and pay additional monies and see what that goes. Or is it, if you want to use the Yard Waste Center, this is the charge, no matter where you are as a resident.
But the $30 is going to go away from the sewer bill? Or the?
No, it's going to have to even go up even more. The sewer bill now is not going to have that additional several dollars in there to have that service. So you're still going to get an increase in the bill. It's actually taking that amount away from us. We would then have to raise bills higher, as you'll see in this budget, to compensate for that. $250,000 we're going to be short. So we'd have to spread that out over 9,300 customers and add that to everybody else's.
All right, before you go further with the budget, I want to get a couple of questions. Anybody have any questions right now at this point with what Bruce has said?
Just one comment that this all is, we're not under the gun now. This is for the end of the year. Because I know your recommendation is, I recommend an increase at the end of the year, not the beginning.
Right.
So this is not urgent now, but we still got to talk about it.
Well,
And once that increase does come, especially with the sewer increase, I keep going back to it, that's the same envelope that comes together.
Right.
Not only will it be a one hit, it'll be a double hit.
well, and I would,
And it's all coming at us no matter what. The bomb's coming, what I call it. Just,
well,
can we put it off or?
and I would say what is urgent to us as a pressing nature is if we're going to charge permits for the Yard Waste Center, it's now October and we have to get, we can't be halfway through the year now and charging people $50 to go to the Yard Waste Center for the last 4 months of the year. That's why it is of urgency for us. You're right on the rate. We would look to bid the garbage, come back, ask the board to approve the contract plus set a rate for the last 4 months of the year. To
Be like prorated.
correct. So your bill would be higher on those last components, once we know what that is. So
But-
that part isn't pressing. Because we can cover that. The other, the shortfall is everything that we're operating in the yard waste center. That's the concern. Or you're gonna have to hit them with a yard waste charge and an increase to their bill towards the end of the year. If that makes sense.
So the question is, do we start having a fee for yard waste drop off at the beginning of the year? And then increase the solid waste bill at the end of the year?
So I have more philosophical questions than exact. So here is my first concern. My first concern is when the new year rolls around, let's just say it's spring because people aren't using it as much in the winter. And people start rolling in with their old sticker and the line backs up down Indian Creek Road onto Brookside Road and we're not letting anybody in. A, how do we avoid that happening is the first problem.
Trying to get enough lead time right now to notify everybody that's there that, hey, your permit expires the end of this year. We're going to need you in here the next 2 months, and trying to process internally, which we're struggling with as a staff, 5,000 permits over our staff. So yes, that is a valid.
So that's number one. Number two is making sure they realize they're getting a sticker per household for a vehicle. There's no paper that you can bring and say, I'm registered. You get a vehicle to come in. Because, as we've discussed in the past, people are passing it around from family member to dump trailer to you name it, to commercial to non-residents. You're getting a sticker that has a date on it. This is for 2024. Now, my suggestion or my feedback would be that the PR plan that we're talking about for the increase in solid waste at the end of the year should include this portion. And it should be like now. It has to go out and break it all out. If you're a resident, currently you pay $90 a month for solid waste and for yard waste. At the end of the year, more than likely, your solid waste is going up 60% with a decrease in services. In addition to that, we have to charge now for yard waste because of the increase in this. And this is what it costs you, and this is how you get your thing. If we don't do that, it doesn't matter if we're charging $5 or $100, the logistical nightmare will not go away. It's going to be crazy. And it has to be in every newsletter. It has to be on the website. It has to be on the board out front. It has to be on any Facebook pages we have or whatever. Like, it's got to be out there. And people need to know what's going on because people are going to they're going to get blown away.
I'm wondering if even maybe Renee can record even a message. Like if somebody's calling in, they get the notice and they want to know more, say if you're calling regarding the notice you got about, solid waste or whatever, press this button, press 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it would give a more detailed explanation. And if you still need to speak to someone, then they can press it on button.
You could also do it in the first quarterly bill. A sticker goes in there. It's saying,
Well-
this is your sticker for the year. And the price is already on the bill. So you've already paid it. So
Well-
congratulations.
Well, this is our problem because I thought that was a great idea. Commissioner Robert had that one too when we discussed it. However, 1/3 of our customers are all electronic. So they get electronic invoices as well as payments.
Okay.
So we're trying to struggle now how take that list, notify them. And look, just from hearing feedback though, I would be very mindful of it, but you could not charge for yard waste at all this year in 24, but you would have to make
Ramp
that
up
up with
to
a higher
25.
garbage bill in the quarter. Right? And you know, in that last quarter, it could be even more like, or last 4 months, it could be even more to cover that 250,000 we're short. But knowing that I'm giving the board a budget saying you're going to be 250,000 in the negative if you
Well,
do that, but it's,
If you look at it this way, and it kind of goes, we're going to combine conversations now. If we did what Commissioner Beitler suggested on the SIP lining, and I actually had a little bit more of a drastic suggestion. There's $250,000 there that can sit alongside that we wouldn't have to make it up at the end of the year. And we can ramp up and get ready to charge for yard waste in 25 as opposed to 24.
correct, but you can't commingle the sewer fund and the sanitation
Got
fund.
it.
So that 250,000 would not be, we can't bill for that. That's not appropriate. That would be
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
I'm
would
not
have-
against breaking the law if we have to do that. I mean,
Well,
I suggested that. a couple years
Okay,
ago,
and-
I got-
I'm from New Jersey. It's just, we get things done.
the auditors wouldn't be happy with that.
okay, in actuality, there's a third piece of this that we've got to take into account as well. And that is the, curbside yard waste pickup and grass clippings. That people do like that. I've gotten several complaints about the yard waste gets cut off too early. And so forth, but are we gonna be able to get that at a reasonable price back into the contract with the waste hauler? Is the township gonna provide an alternative service? Or is it gonna be another thing that, well, you lose that and you gotta take it down to the township?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, that the whole grass pickup has not been in the contract all that long. And that's one of those, by the way, your rate's going up, but your services are going down, because there's no way,
I would bet that goes.
I would bet it goes away, but, and there's no way we're picking it up. There's just,
Right.
we don't have the capacity or, I mean, the messaging to the residents has to be severe. Here's the deal. You're paying more and you're getting less, and we know that, but it's completely out of our control.
So we have to include that in the messaging that
Yes.
is going.
Well,
on,
and
if
that's
that's
why
what we decide.
we talk about a PR campaign, and literally everybody gets a letter, and it has to be like a blitzkrieg of doomsday. And I want to say a Mike Siegel email, that, the world is going to end if you don't do this. It's got to be so severe so that people understand. Luckily, and the lucky part is it doesn't take effect until August. But you're right, we'd have to figure out a way to supplement that 250 at the end of the year.
And does that does that give you enough time as much as, you'll see in here, because we haven't broken down about what yard waste costs us, but is it better to, take that cost, make up that difference towards the end of next year, not require a permit, get the blitz out where, August comes, your invoice goes up. And then we also put that notice out, hey, in 2025, you're going to need, you're going to need to get a permit at that point, because we've seen the response from, what the contract is.
Right.
You're definitely going to need to get that.
Is there a possibility that if they decide not to pick up their option by February, we negotiate with them to extend our current contract through the end of the year? And just say, listen, we have no problem with what you want to do and how you're going to do it, but can we go to an actual calendar year contract? Because the contract ending in August is a little difficult when it comes to budgeting purposes. Because we've been such a great customer for them and we worked so well together. Could you just extend us for 4 months and then we'll start a whole new contract? But
It is.
They said they're losing money.
Sorry?
Waste Management says they're losing money.
I'm sure they are. Listen, I don't doubt it. Looking at everything else and the way gas prices are and what's going on and what they got to pay their people. We've been very, very generous with what we've never even really fought anything they've asked us for, and they've been very generous to us. Extend it by 4, we'll sign a new contract now, but don't put it into effect until the first of the year.
They're losing money. It's related to the price of fuel.
Yeah.
So they're also, they're not getting as much out of recycling.
And labor right now,
And I'm
labor
sure-
shortage.
And landfills, I'm sure, are charging more because they have equipment.
Yeah.
They move
Fuel-
stuff around.
fuel
Fuel.
Listen,
You may want to look at possibly see if we could amend the current contract, if we allow for the single can pickup and make changes to the current contract through amendments versus they might be able to, they might be able to work with us if we clamp down ourselves on what we give them.
I mean, it's definitely a question for legal, and I think it's a great idea.
I mean, I think there's all these options on the table. I think this is important that we bring these up right now because like as bad as the sewer thing is and as bad as some other things are, this is happening. Like this is not it might happen. This is happening and it's happening in 10 months. I mean, thankfully there's an article out there about South Whitehall already, so we can, reference that article. But yeah, this isn't imaginary.
I think this is good discussion. I mean, because it's helpful. And the brainstorming is helpful, at least on my end. So a couple things here, when we look at that yard waste center, the labor, where we are with this. So we pulled some our work orders for staffing, and it's where we base these numbers are. We're seeing about 2 individuals in public works spending about 1,000 hours each, working to transport all of these goods, take them everywhere, grind them, and pile turn, everything with that. I would note, as you see further down is the contracted leaf collection. This doesn't include any costs for our individuals in that labor component doing our annual leaf collection, which is, 9 guys over 2 months worth of labor plus equipment and machines. This is just the cost to, what's brought here and hauled away where we have to take it. Part-time salaries, those are our yard waste lot attendants. That repairs and maintenance is for equipment related to all of our recycling. Elm equipment rental, we do have to rent a tub grinder as part of Elm, the Scarab. There's rental for dump truck, things of that nature. That 186,800 is before insurances because we do insure, and I didn't break it out this way, but we do insure that Elm equipment. We do have, components of workers' comp, things of that nature that we direct here. So that doesn't include the health insurance either for those 2 individuals when we prorate that out to that like $58,000 worth of components. So you're pushing maybe a little bit over that 250, but that's kind of the 250 number breakdown on just yard waste. And that doesn't include permitting, the calls we receive, all of the issues that we deal with internally that you could put extra staff on top of that. Here are picture of those revenues, right? It's basically solid waste charges. So very little on the yard waste permit and fees, interest in those grants. That grant, you'll get an annual performance grant. The other ones for equipment and build out are, we can apply for those. We think that they can be sponsored, but there's a 2-year funding cycle on how they fund those out too. So they're not always guaranteed. Those expenditures, much like in the sewer fund, that finance administration side, accounting, payroll processing, payment processing, 40,000 legal, the admin part of that, the 50% of an administrative assistant as they deal with a lot of those type of things, phone and data, the billing software, which is part of the contracted services. That's 68,000. Some engineering. We really don't have any engineering until we start to develop the compost center site. building and facilities, we take a cut with the equipment over there and storage of the power and the heat. The recycling collection, which is, grant writer, repairs and maintenance, contracted leaf collection now, the curbside yard waste, that's 837,000. And then that big number, the solid waste, which goes right to the hauler, for them picking you up curbside. Employer benefits, there's that breakdown, the workers' comp, health insurance, and that capital project, which is the grant funded item. We're hopeful we get the grant. That's a $425,000 item in there. So that doesn't take into account anything out of rates or anything to buy that. That's basically a grant machine. There's how it looks. So of course, the big chunk on solid waste, and then that recycling collection, and then the truck on the capital projects. Questions about that side of it? I would say what that doesn't account for either is any future capital replacements of that equipment for the yard waste site. Loader, turner, file turner, grinder, and you're talking, and we've said this before, potentially renting that equipment instead of putting down the $1 million, $750 to $1 million a piece on a grinder or whatnot. So we should also think long-term if we're going to stay in that business on starting to replace that equipment at some point and how we're going to fund that, which, ultimately is we don't want to shock ratepayers even more. We should think about a fee for equipment replacement. So any questions on solid waste? We talked a good discussion on this.
Okay, so it sounds to me like what the proposal is to not do a permitting fee for yard waste this year but to tell people that it's coming. And that also gives us some time to talk about really the overall, what is the plan for the yard waste system? And so in the funding for it, do we need to include the capital funds and so on and so forth in the amount that we do bill?
Yeah, and I would caution with that proposal, I would just want to be mindful, you're going to have to raise the trash billings high enough to recoup the 250,000 yard waste operational expenses as well. If you choose not to do that, we're going to be negative 250 in the hole. If we zero out permits, you're going to have to be on board with making that rate cover it for the last 4 months of the year.
Or decide to take it from fund balance?
Well, you have no fund balance in this account.
Huh?
You have no fund balance. You transfer it from the general fund balance.
Yeah.
But you would have to transfer it in on that side of it.
It's a brand new fund.
Right. You have no existing fund balance. I'm just trying to run real quick.
I have this down as question number 4 for Monday, by the way.
You're talking $27 to cover that 250 over 9,300 ratepayers. So you would have to take the garbage rate plus an additional 27 and then divide that by 4. You're talking another $680 a month that you'd have to put on top of that 48. So you'd have to go to like 54 and change.
Divided by
Or should we go ahead and?
because August.
Well, you're going to be in the mid-quarter.
Yeah.
Right.
Or should we go ahead and increase from the beginning of the year, the charge for up to $100 rather than 90?
Then you have to raise rates twice. And I would say you could do that to cover it, but you'd have to raise rates twice.
Right.
I have this down as one of those we'll decide on Monday type things. Yard waste center fee, yay or nay. And then subcategories, if and when. So we can kind of solidify that. Any other questions for Bruce? Okay.
All right, let's jump into everybody's favorite thing, capital projects fund. Before we do that, I did want to mention to the board, so we included in your binder right in front of the general fund tab, there and right in front of the schedule. We did work as a staff internally to, tweak our 5-year components of planning, 4 or 5-year capital plans. I actually took it out until 2030, as it's important to show the debt service payments, that we would need to make on that component. Just briefly, we have stormwater components. We've got, playgrounds, courts, fields, trails, pathways, and parks. A tennis pickleball court area, fields, trails and pathways, parks general, roads and bridges, streets, vehicles and equipment, culverts, vehicles and equipment, facilities, and then total capital projects. I would note several things in what we've given to the board in this. It
So-
does not include any main building or public works updates or repairs as we are still working with our evaluation company to have those done. So you'll notice in that category of facilities, that is zeroed out in future years. We do not include at this point either roofs and roof repairs as that evaluation is ongoing. We should have it by the end of the year. We don't include recreation impact fees as far as what I show as revenue. Various projects are in planning. We can't rely on those. We've talked about future facility planning, also not included, which we've been asked on the fire station from the fire department. If the main building needs replaced or the public works building needs replaced or renovated, the fire apparatus fleet that we currently should start saving for as well. This document that you see before you is vetted out things that we and I as a manager recommend should be completed. They include plans that we've seen for trailways, our trails and pathways to get our parks where they need to be. The fleet plan is what has come from Public Works on that side. And I would note, interestingly enough, you're anywhere from, 5 million on the lowest of approximately 3.9 million each year over those next components without those reviews and reports. We currently generate approximately 1,320,000 per year in property tax revenues. So if you're looking at the total for all the projects that we have listed, it's $23,936 and $936,050. Our total available fund balance as of August 31st is just about 16.5 million. So to do all of these projects, you would have to exhaust all fund balance, and then would still be negative $6,634,000 to not be able to accomplish them. What we see in this part, and of course, it's a capital budget, so things can change as we get pricing or would have projects that may or may not be completed or have to be completed in that time frame. Just as a general overview, you can use open space funding for a component, and like I said, that recreational impact fee, which could be several $1 million over the next 2 to 3 years for projects that we have in key. If you look at the chart, what this tells me is you're usually negative about $3 million, $3 to $5 million on this page on the last sheet. So you would need to either triple taxes to make up that gap, or remove the homestead and then double taxes to make up your difference. So what we took from that interesting 5-year component piece, we dropped certain items off of that and came up with a baseline capital budget that we've included in your book now of things that we may be able to afford, and what we would recommend now as a staff are more within our budget.
Before we move too far into this, you had brought up the 5-year capital plan. Are we going to talk about that on Monday or?
I would say we can talk about it now. It's here before you. It's in the, I included it as part of the handout in your budget packet. We can take, those
Or-
thoughts and have where they go.
Okay, so, well, especially since there's an interested party here, I think going about the parks and so forth might be beneficial tonight.
Sure.
One thing is, it doesn't make any sense to replace 2 parks each year over a 5-year period when the equipment lasts for, what is it, 15 years?
It doesn't, but the problem is we've gone into such disrepair with our equipment that now we can't get parts and they are all priority repairs. So we're to the point where we can't stretch these out on a cycle to get a long-term component. We would agree that these items should go once every 15 years. However, because we haven't addressed them now, we're in a situation where we have to aggressively replace them.
And I think one of the conversations that has to be had too, as we go through all of these is, do we replace them at all? You know, which ones do we replace and which ones do we eliminate? Because do we need a playground at every single park in the township?
And you'll notice on this chart, this is actually feedback that we received from the board as part of when we talked about the long-term park plan, where it shrinks those and we're still unable to, get where we need to be, even with an aggressive 2 play set per year replacement. So, some of those like Camp Olympic and, Church Lane are fairly newer. We think they'll last through that entire 6-7 year cycle till 2030. But those are the limited on that. Not major cutback, but that moderate with some additional like 2 or 3 keeping them from what the board saw. So these don't include the other things that would need repaired or removed. And I think it's important to note that in here.
Okay, and well, okay, so in 2024, there's money for Spring Ridge Park Playground to eliminate Danfield 1 and Winding Brook, but there's no money in there for the street crossing of Brookside to allow people from Winding Brook to get there.
That's correct.
And so is that going to be added into the budget for 2024?
It can be if the board chooses to use that part. We continue to promote the other park at the other end of Winding Brook as a neighborhood park that individuals have access to, that they don't need to walk across Brookside Road. We think that that's the best alternative, as that is neighborhood recreation. It's probably just as far as walking across Brookside and going to Spring Ridge. And that's why that is a component of a park or a playground that we think can be removed.
Julie has.
Julie, you got to just come up and speak to the microphone, please.
But there is direct access to a park.
The mic, pull it down.
Sorry, there is direct access to a park behind Winding Brook to the west.
Right.
I can't think.
Brookfield
Brookfield.
Park. That is
Uh,
the backside of Winding Brook. Yes, it's right next to Winding Brook.
yeah. So, I mean, sometimes when you start talking about crossings and things.
Yeah.
You almost have to, again, have a map of the township, pinpoint where the sets are, which ones you can take out. I mean, you don't have to worry about a crossing. If people can get to that park, that's perfectly reasonable.
But a lot of people do use the walkway and do cross Brookside Road at that spot.
Okay, but that's a different topic. That's not playgrounds.
Well, they're tied together.
That's part of
Yeah.
walkway.
That's
Yeah,
Walking
that would be
the
that's part of
connection
walking
of the
path.
pathway or the use of the
Well-
playground,
Because I would tell you as an argument, I wouldn't replace the play set in Spring Ridge Crossing. I would get rid of it. Wild Cherry's right up the road. We're gonna put a lot of money in Wild Cherry. People can get to Wild Cherry and go. You got a baseball field, you got flat fields there. You don't have to have a park or a playground set. You know, this is where we start to regionalize.
We see that as one of our heaviest used, heaviest concentrated parks, that Danfield Park.
Now I'm talking about Spring Creek Estate, Spring Creek Estates, Spring Ridge Crossing.
Well, Spring Ridge, there is no park. We're proposing to get that out of Danfield on the corner and get it into Spring Ridge so that we can have a larger space there. And then that access for all the townhouses, that Danfield Park on the corner catches both of those. And we're seeing it's a heavy use area.
Then my question would be, instead of relocating it, why not just replace what's there on a smaller scale? Like, instead of a bigger scale project.
We could, either way, it's going to cost us the same amount. We figured it would be better with parking to get people away from the street intersection. Either way, we think, we're around the 300,000 to 400,000 if we pour in place with the standard playground set like we're going to do at Farmington. So we said, instead of putting it right back in the same spot, let's get it a little further and get people up out of the way and not have them in the cross street intersection.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so next question. The pickleball courts on campus do have lighting now.
They do not. That lighting is removed as it's not in the middle of the courts. That couldn't be accommodated to keep it in the center.
Okay, so the lights are no longer there.
Correct.
Hence the $180,000 to put back what was already there.
Correct.
Different than what.
Moscow.
Yeah,
Right, Moscow
it's a
light.
different quality of lighting.
Correct.
But since there were lighted tennis courts previously, and we took those away, it seems like we ought to give a priority to having lighted tennis courts. So the hills at Lock Ridge court rehab and lights probably ought to be moved up in priority.
We would recommend that if you would like to put lights at that complex, that court is actually in good shape. It's one of our nicest courts. We would not rehab the surface at this point. That's why it was put a little bit further back. However, to light that court, we can definitely move that up on the list. But our priority, which where we went through, is we prioritize by our worst court conditions. So Wild Cherry, then West Coastville, and then we figured at that point we could get to the Hills of Lockridge tennis courts. However, we can try to accommodate lights at that. We would just not recommend that it gets resurfaced.
What, of the 325 that's allocated for that, what part would be the resurfacing? What part would be lighting?
We're figuring that difference from the 230 is a typical mill out and repave and do a full complete quarter.
About 95,000 then for lights.
Correct. Probably be a little more than that.
And the 180 is probably about the number for the lights.
For back here in this situation.
Bigger area, right?
It's probably going to be close to the same. We might be a little off, might be 180 in that number.
So that would be double then what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and as far as the fields, we've talked about tearing down the West Coastville Community Center and putting in a restroom and
Well, potential. We've talked about a potential replacement. We've definitely talked about tearing it down. We haven't come up with plan number two
okay,
of
but
that.
we have conceptualized doing a restroom and something else, be it a snack bar or
Mhm.
equipment storage or something. And it seems like, okay, so do the people using West Coast Field Park currently use the restroom in the community center?
They use it for, when they're having events at the log house, but there is a restroom behind the one softball field. It's not the best, most glamorous restroom, but in the storage building if you look at that facility to the left is bathrooms.
Okay, so there is restrooms facilities there.
They are. They're not the best though.
Okay, but someplace in the 5-year plan, the building of the restroom there probably ought to be included.
Correct. And what we would need to be mindful of, as the planning director has told me, we can't knock that building down and then have it sit for over, I believe, a year until we have to go all the way back through the land development process, which will take us 5 years. So we
We're not
want
tearing it down.
we want to be mindful of the preparing a cost estimate for the board of a new restroom, keeping that building as long as we can standing and upright
Okay.
before it goes down. We have started to engage to put some costs together for that. I just don't have them for this component.
Something new, huh? From our last discussion.
It is. I did my ignorance to that side of the planning.
So,
Oh,
go ahead, Maury.
okay, and as far as vehicles and equipment, we've talked about this before, that are we replacing trucks too quickly? What's the actual useful life of one of our trucks? I mean, is it based on miles? Is it based on,
Some on years, none on miles.
and, okay, so how long is the depreciation on the trucks now?
Jeff, what is your depreciation?
It's just 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years?
A lot of them are written off.
And we get rid of them at 10 years?
Some of them longer than that. It depends on what it is. Pickup trucks we've been trying to turn around earlier, like 7 to 10 years. I can tell you the Explorer downstairs 319, it's a 2013. It has low miles, but at some point it needs to be on its way. Some of the older dump trucks that we have in the fleet have very low miles. They may only have 48,000 miles on them, but they're pushing that 15, 18 year lifespan. And what we're going to see on larger vehicles is that, 20-year lifespan, 15 to 20 on some of the larger ones, some of the smaller ones. I mean, we have not a bunch, but we have a few pickups that are 20 years old. The crew cab and a couple of the other ones that are still in parks. What we're finding on these things, they're in really good shape. Some of them are rusting away, probably from the aggressive salting that we do. So we had several pickup trucks that had low mileage that we just got rid of in an auction, that were, sub 75,000 miles, but the frames were rusting on them. So we're seeing different components. Some of our tandems, we're trying to push that 20-year replacement. We have frame rails now that are starting to rust away on the Freightliner at least. So we're trying to be mindful to keep them longer, get some more miles on them, and potentially a reduction of fleet in general at some point where, you're putting more miles on other vehicles. So you're getting that lifespan, both miles and age. So you'll notice that that's the submitted request that we provided in there. The 2024 budget proposes the purchase of no vehicles, as we look to try to address parks and some of those other items. To give that year a break. We did hear that feedback from the board about potentially keeping things a little bit longer, and making that happen. I would say we can't put it off for very long, but there's always, as we talked Thursday, always that balancing act of where do you go on the component of getting residual value back out of these vehicles and finding that tipping point where you're still realizing really good gains when they go to auction. So if we put that $85,000 pickup truck on there, if we keep it 10 years, are we seeing a $20,000 or $25,000 return? So it makes it more worthwhile to get rid of that asset quicker than we run it longer and longer and longer and turn it over that way. As I said previous, some of our peers, as they look at these staff cars or police cars, like some of these hybrid vehicles where they have a battery issue where they're only warranted for 7, they're automatically getting rid of them now for 6 so that they don't have to deal with anything that's not under warranty. And that's an aggressive, no matter what the miles are, it's going to be an aggressive dump these vehicles before the warranty expires. So it's how you want to look at where we are and what the approach is. So we're trying to be mindful of that.
Okay, well, as far as the dump trucks are concerned, we have like 10 of them that Public Works uses, right?
We actually have more than that. There's, and I can bring out my list here, but you're talking in the single and tandem varieties, 12. You have 2, I would call smaller, like 1 tons over there in that fleet that are in parks and in roads. So that accomplishes the dump truck fleet. Where you're heavy at this point is pickups. You're like 20 pickups in to the fleet. So I think there's some eventual balancing that needs to happen there. It was good to have those additional vehicles when we had summer staffing of, 14, 15, 18 people. We're seeing in that realistic view that, potentially, I feel anyway, I know the department directors would like certain things replaced, but I would see that you have the ability to eventually reduce parts of those. But yeah, large dump trucks, you're in the 12 range.
And so 12 dump trucks and they last for 15 years. It seems like we shouldn't be buying more than 1 dump truck a year.
That's correct. Large dump trucks, which we haven't been doing. We've been trying to now do 1 and 1 and 1 to get those on a cycle to get them
But yeah,
out.
so to the extent that we can work it into a routine cycle so that we, I thought we could do it once every 2 years, but it sounds like we got more trucks and shorter life than I was assuming.
I think we could slide once every 2 years and do a 24-year replacement potentially on the larger trucks. I think there's there with mileage plus where it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to get I think the headline of this budget out of the way so that we can, and I think we should probably have another workshop meeting just on the 5-year plan or your 7-year plan here, not during budget process, but in a month where maybe things are a little slower, or we book a second workshop meeting just to go over things that maybe aren't in there that should be, or we have those conversations. But in looking at this capital budget, I determined between general fund and reserve fund, we would need a $1.8 million to complete everything in here.
That's correct. So prior year fund balance, 1.125 million, 650 general fund. And then I actually brought into part of the recreation impact fee dollars, which is really going to limit us, but that was for the lighting projects.
Right.
I would advise the board that is going to make that fund very lean. So that is the other component of this that you might want to consider. If you see projects that are in the planning process, including like Woodmont, you'd see a $400,000 or $500,000 rec fee there. The North Crocs, your 300 units, you're about 1.2 million there. I don't know how that may affect your thinking about spending these general dollars towards recreational components, but you will have recreation impact fees coming if those projects move forward.
Well, the thing is, that's the type of fund that isn't needed for an emergency. It's
Correct.
there for
Regional recreation.
recreation improvement. So even if it's lean for a year, it's not one of those where if we don't have the money there, we're in a lot of trouble, because the chance of us having an emergency that would come out of that fund are pretty slim.
Correct. But knowing and making the board and the public aware that we are getting down to our last large contributions into that fund. So if you need it in 4 or 5 years and we've spent it all, we need to be mindful of that component too. Is it better to, I would say, spread those out on occasion, like you said, when it's less of an emergency, use it on these one-off items, keep that money in the bank until we have more significant projects. Is, you know,
So what I would say is, our job, the 5 of us, is looking at this list, and I would suggest looking at the detailed part here, because it lays out, I think, in more clearly what is under each one of these subcategories, to determine A, what should be or could be eliminated. B,
Well, wait a minute. Where is what you're looking at?
the actual
it's right at the back of the so if you go to the capital funds.
in the 30 tab.
tab.
Oh.
And I would say I also have I'll circulate a list to the board too. I actually
Okay, but
have
so
one.
that's the capital fund for this year.
Correct.
Just for this year, not the long term.
Right.
This is what staff is recommending. If we're gonna go all out on capital, this is the capital project that should be done first. But knowing that, to do them all, we'd have to spend $1.8 million that is not accounted for in our budget without taking it from someplace else.
Correct. It's actually a little more than that because of that developer impact. fee.
Right, well, I
Yeah, but I don't count that.
that one, but
Right.
yeah, I was
Eh.
just looking at capital or general fund and reserve.
And I would, note to the board, our priority areas, which is $1 million of that 1.3 includes the replacement of Gun Club Road Bridge,
Mhm.
and the required $534,000 worth of required MS4 projects that must be done by
Right.
March of 2025.
Yeah, I mean, there's things in here that we can't take out. So it's either we do what we have to do with the money that we have, or we prioritize if there's something here we think we should do and use money towards it or not.
Correct.
That's what we're here for. We're here to make those recommendations and decisions. What I would also recommend is if you go back and look at the 7-year plan and there's something in there that isn't in this year's list of projects that you think is of a high priority or a higher priority personally, to come back with that as well. So let's say you don't think that we should do any playground equipment, but we should do 4 walking trails in the next year. We should look at that as well and make sure that we come to a consensus, or at least a majority, of what we're willing to spend and do in this budget for Monday night. Does that sound accurate to you, Mr. Vital?
That would be helpful on my end. Thank you. I would, I would just, I appreciate that feedback. We've heard, we've heard the board and we've tried to accommodate certain things in there. We've also included, like I said, those things for safety, getting that playground equipment replaced, replacing bridges, and replacing the MS4 required things as that component.
Okay, now, a sort of related question is the COVID funds.
So the COVID funds, and we can talk about that in detail. We mentioned it briefly Thursday. So the COVID funds have been transferred to the capital budget. They are included in that overall number that I gave you. You'll see in Jeff's spreadsheet on the front, he does a nice part of the fund balance and where that is. So those are incorporated into both the general fund, the $1 million, and the capital project side for where we would be eventually with everything.
So even with those funds incorporated, there's still the shortfall.
That's correct.
Well,
Well, not of fund balance, right? Not of fund balance, but you're going to have to use that, 2.675 million. You're going to use $1 million of it. And you're going to have $1 million approximately.
yeah, and I think the bottom line here is historically, and when I say historically, at least over the last 10 years, when we've gotten this budget document, it had it whittled down to, this is what the capital projects look like with the money that we have for it. And we've never really had to have a discussion on whether something should be added, subtracted, should we take money and do more than what is being suggested? This one this year actually lists what's recommended we do, but understanding it's going to cost more than we're actually bringing in.
That's correct.
So we actually have to make decisions on whether we should or not. And that's fine. I think that's great. And that's the way it should work, and probably should work moving forward, so that it's not just on staff to say, I tell this story all the time, but before I was on the board and I used to deal with a member of staff about something, I would always be told why we couldn't do something because this is what it costs. And the only thing I ever wanted as a commissioner was tell me how we can do something and let me tell you we can't do it because of cost. Well, I've been asking for this for 10 years, so I'm really excited to have it. Because I think we should be able to say, yes, this is important. It should be done sooner, and it's worth the money we're going to spend. And more, when you were in the bathroom, what I said was, on Monday, if you look at this list, but you think we shouldn't spend this much on playgrounds, but should spend this much on 6 walking paths, we bring that too and say, okay, is that more important?
Well,
Because if we don't do it this way, nothing is ever going to get done.
or the other component of this, which, we need to be mindful of, which I never try to recommend, or you need to identify and say, we need to raise taxes so that we can appropriately fund these things, see what they actually cost, and say, okay, well, we know fund balance will be exhausted. As a proactive measure, we're going to have to
Right.
address it through the way we generate revenue, which is taxes.
What do we lose on the homestead rebate?
About $450,000.
Through the open space fund, we didn't take into account.
Correct.
Use for,
We can use
trails,
that.
You can,
for open space improvement.
correct.
But currently, we have it earmarked to pay off the debt from,
No,
You're gonna
50%
have-
can be used
Yeah,
for-
you're right.
no, I know that.
But we're gonna have after next year, we'll probably have about 1.4 million in fund balance. We have around $1.1 million available, so there are dollars available.
$500,000 available.
Correct.
in
It,
that
if you
open
should,
space fund.
if you should choose as a policy decision that you want to engage and use those dollars.
And what I heard tonight too, the rec fee can that be used for these projects?
Yeah.
Rec fee can be used for anything of
That's-
regional recreational significance.
I left that in there. I didn't include it in the $1.8 million because it's specifically for recreation. So let me ask this question, because then I'm misinformed and I want to be informed properly. It was my impression that when we purchased the property on the Dorney track, thank you. There's so many tracks around here, I can't remember which one. The Dorney track, that the first 5 years of that open space fee basically covered that purchase.
That's correct. However, we did sell land to the Turnpike Commission, which is
Okay.
that 651,000. And we did have a little bit, we budgeted fairly low on what our collection was anticipated to be. So we're, 50, 100,000
Okay.
on that component. And next year with our open space fund, which we reviewed Thursday, we anticipate to receive about 230,000 more than what that service is going to cost us. So you're going to net in 2024 an additional 230 in fund balance.
So in reality, there's about $600,000 in that fund that could be used for certain things, not for anything.
700.
Yeah, hold on. I'll let me look here where I'm at. I want to give you guys the right number.
Like, just out of curiosity, like the walking trail around or the connector around the hillside school, is that considered?
That was a grant.
Well, that's a grant, so
Oh, that's grant.
we're covered there. So like, we think we'll have about 1.6 million next year with fund balance in that open space fund.
And we
At
can
the end of the
use
year, at the end of the year.
Right,
we
I'm,
can
I'm
use
thinking about
50%.
now for this budget,
No, no. So you would be around,
800,000.
1.4 at the end of this year.
Okay, so around 700,000. We could use 50%.
You can use 50% of the annual money. So that's $1 million a year.
Gotcha.
You could use 50% for land, 25 and 25, 25 for improvements, 25 for maintenance. So you could use 700 as an improvement, 700, I'm sorry, 500 a year, 500 and 500 in that component.
But, okay, so there are some, I thought there were limits on the land that you could use for doing the improvements.
I'll confirm the legal opinion I have, but I believe the last legal opinion I had said that the law actually changed. Harrisburg did support any open
Right.
open, passive, or
You're
active
right, Maury. It
space.
was that way when we first went that way, but it did change.
Okay.
Correct.
I read somewhere, did you send it out to change?
Probably,
They,
probably. I'll have to,
that's where I got that 50%.
Cool.
yeah.
All right. Any other questions about the capital budget for right now?
Good. We don't want
We're
to talk
good?
about it. I have projects here that are in that book. If you choose to,
I mean,
they're pretty self-explanatory in
they
there.
are self-explanatory when you go through the detail
Yeah.
part here.
Yep. Yeah. So
Bruce is mad now because he did all these slides and I'm not letting him use
it's
them.
all right. It's all right. I'm ready. I'm ready for education with the slides. So any questions on,
Julie, you have a question?
I would say one of my other, while Julie's coming up, one of my other priority things are that the culvert on Chestnut Street, which is falling down. So that's
Yes.
500 plus 100, gun club plus that, plus the MS4.
Okay.
Sorry.
Julie?
The township building is not included in those numbers that I've provided to the board on the 7-year plan. We are working with our facility engineers. They've been out here to do an assessment. They're waiting to complete the assessment. They've looked at the space required. So it is not in here. We're on the square footage price. We're probably between 12 and 15 million for a new township building.
Yeah, I was going to say there are parts in there, which I hope we don't spend because I don't want to spend any more spare parts on a building, but I know that that's coming, or at least the numbers coming.
Yeah, I got a question, nothing to do with the budget, but, Brookside Road, what is it, the Grace property? Down from the Brookside Deli.
Yes, the
Any-
Faith property.
Any, inquiries or movement on that?
We just got a meeting
Well,
invite.
and I'm only asking because we consider that as a location which decided it was no good.
Didn't we just get a meeting request from somebody? I think it was about.
I would say that the township has heard feedback that there may be interested parties in that parcel.
I totally forgot. I got an email.
So we have interest.
We are hearing that there's potentially
Rumor is
parties interested in that land.
Rumor is what?
that there's an interested party in the Faith property.
We did decide that wouldn't be
Yeah.
a fit, correct?
I don't think we decided it wouldn't be a fit. I think we decided at the time it wasn't worth what they wanted for it.
For the new township.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing? No.
I guess it all depends on what they're willing to sell the land for.
They were nuts. Well.
I would
They were out of range.
say that might be also something you're
word.
mindful of as you consider those open space dollars, as there might be properties available at some point that you may choose or find worthwhile to not deplete that fund.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's it. Unless there's any questions for me, I think we have our list. Jeff, you good to go? We'll have our list here and we'll get some clarification on the Hills of Lockridge lights. we're talking about the West Coastville building. We won't have a price in time for next Monday. Is there any other questions for me or staff that we can have ready as well, for this discussion or for anything else?
When's the next week? Monday?
Monday night.
Well,
6
actually,
o'clock.
we have a meeting Thursday
Thursday.
and then Monday. October's like that. Okay, no, I don't
Anything
think that's it.
All right, and if any of the other board members want to see the presentation from Thursday, I'm more than happy to keep going for another hour. And talk about open space and
I
all
was
of those
hoping for at
things.
least 2 more.
We did it in an hour and a half the other night. So it's up to you.
You're adjourned.
Appreciate the offer.